Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, anyways, man, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this fight that is going to be happening, I believe, November 6th, as the date says right there. So, this fight does not happen this week or next week, but the week after that. Next week, I believe, is the big UFC pay per view with Jan Blachowicz defending his title and a couple of other very decent fights. So, I'll have to review that one as well, and as well as watch the card. But this Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant fight, man, I'm decently excited for it. I think that it's a very, very decent fight. I do believe that this is on Showtime pay per view. This, of course, is going to be for all the belts, and whoever wins this fight is going to be the complete 168 unified champion of the world. So this is a very, very exciting fight. I was really hoping that we would get to see this fight later on in the year. Caleb Plant is a very decently talented fighter, in my opinion. He's very slick. I think he's got very good hand speed, very good feet, decent movement. And, those styles in the past have proven to be, at times, a little bit of a problem for Canelo Alvarez. But, when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, when it comes down to it, I think that he's at a very good spot in his career. Canelo Alvarez, I think he's about 30, 31 years old. If he's a bit older, someone let me know. But I believe he's around that age. I think he's about 30. But if I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. Either way, when it comes down to it, Canelo, he's got a lot left in his career if he decides to keep on going, if he decides to keep on boxing. And Canelo Alvarez, I think ever since that Gennady Golovkin rematch, I think that Canelo Alvarez has pretty much been at his best form possible. I think the first time that I really realized that Canelo Alvarez really could potentially be the number one pound for pound fighter in the world, I thought it could have been in that second Gennady Golovkin fight. Because Canelo, I thought, looked decently skilled. I thought that he looked more improved. And I thought that he just pulled out that fight against Gennady Golovkin against a fighter that I thought was a very, very decent fighter. Even though, of course, he had a little bit of limitations in certain areas. But when it comes down to it, man, ever since then, really, for almost his whole entire career, Canelo Alvarez has been on a great tear. And when you take a look at Canelo Alvarez's career, the only loss that he really has in his whole entire career is against Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, of course, some people would debate that he also has a couple of other debatable losses. I've heard people debate that he lost to Austin Trout, Araceli Lara, Gennady Golovkin, and was even losing a couple of other fights before he ended up winning the fights. And, depending on which fight you're talking about, I think the first Gennady Golovkin fight, I do believe that Gennady Golovkin won that fight. The Araceli Lara fight, you could possibly debate that Canelo Alvarez lost that fight. I could see, an argument for that. Don't really see much of an argument for Austin Trout. I think that he clearly beat Austin Trout, even though Austin Trout tried to make it as competitive as he could. And Canelo, ever since the Gennady Golovkin rematch, I think all in all that he really has fought some great fighters. He beats, a little bit more of a wore down version of Sergey Kovalev, but still a very great version of Sergey Kovalev. A Kovalev that was the champion at the time and was coming off of two very dominant wins against two very talented light heavyweight fighters at the time. And on top of that, he also has a win over Danny Jacobs within the past few years. He has a win over Billy Joe Saunders. He has a win, I believe, over Callum Smith. And now he's going to be facing Caleb Plant. And, Canelo, I'm not going to say that Caleb Plant can beat him. I'm not going to say that he can't, because he is very decently slick, and I think that he's a talented fighter. But Canelo Alvarez, it's kind of to that point at this time in his career to where I think it's going to really take a very, 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 very special fighter to defeat Canelo Alvarez, like another number one possible pound for pound fighter, like an Andre Ward level of fighter, in my opinion. Now, ironically, Caleb Plant, he actually went to Andre Ward's gym, I believe, and tried to train with him and learn some things from him, all in all, to beat Canelo Alvarez, because I think they both believe that, all in all, that little slick style, all in all, is going to be the way to possibly beat Canelo Alvarez. And Canelo, I do think that is a possible way to possibly beat him, because Canelo, he does at times have flat feet and he doesn't have the fastest feet. That would really be the main fault I would say that Canelo Alvarez has. Really, at this point in time, really the only fault that he has. But almost in every other category, Canelo is almost spotless when you talk about his skill set. I mean, Canelo Alvarez, besides, the slow feet at times and overall the feet that sometimes can be a little bit flat-footed, besides that, Canelo Alvarez has really improved on his head movement. I think that he's really improved on his ability to cut off the ring. His counter-punching ability is very, very good. He's very slick. His defense has majorly improved as well. I've seen Canelo Alvarez in his past several fights. I've seen him against Danny Jacobs. I've seen him against Billy Joe Saunders. I've seen him against Sergey Kovalev. I've seen him against, Callum Smith and, whoever else you want to mention, and it's like, this Billy Joe Saunders, I don't really remember a whole lot of flush punches that landed on Canelo Alvarez. I'm not saying that there was not, a couple here and there, but it's very hard to hit him flush. And that is probably the most difficult thing about facing Canelo Alvarez at this point in time in his career. He is not just a very great counterpuncher. He not only has a great power and can hurt you with a devastating shot at any point in time, but Canelo Alvarez, he has excellent defense. And the worst type of fighters to fight are the fighters that not only are good offensively and can hit you from anywhere, but they're extremely hard to hit. And Canelo Alvarez is extremely hard to hit at this point in time in his career. And that's why if you're, asking me for my fight prediction on this, I have to go with Canelo Alvarez. I think that all in all, Canelo Alvarez, I just think that he's too good to really be beat at this point in time, especially by these fighters at the 160 and 168, pound weight classes. I think that they're very talented. I think that all of them are very talented. I think that, Caleb Plant is very talented. I think David Benavidez is very talented. I think Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo are all very talented. But to me, they're kind of all along that same line. And Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and, a couple of others that I may not be mentioning, they're all pretty much along that same line as well. I don't see any of those fighters beating Canelo, because I think that they have multiple flaws in their style. I only see one major flaw that Canelo Alvarez has in his. Now, who knows? Maybe one of these days, maybe it'll be Caleb Plant. I don't know. Maybe he'll face a fighter that really gives him a whole lot of problems with that defensive style, that slick style, and he doesn't cut off the ring against them very well. I don't know. But Canelo, to be quite honest with you, when I take a look at him, and when I take a look at some of the other Mexican fighters in history, no matter who you want to compare him to, no matter if you want to compare him to Juan Manuel Marquez, Eric Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera, Sanchez back in the day, or even Julio Cesar Chavez or Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya, of course, was Mexican-American, but, still of Mexican descent. Canelo might be the most skilled Mexican fighter that I've personally ever seen. That's my opinion on Canelo Alvarez personally. Some people may disagree, especially if you grew up, during the 80s and during the 90s. You probably, of course, are going to say that it was Julio Cesar Chavez. But when it comes down to it, man, I even think Canelo was more skilled than he was. Canelo, all in all, is an extremely slick fighter. He's a great fighter. Like I said, there's only one fault that I can really say that Canelo Alvarez has had, and just slow feet. That would really be about it. But other than that, there's no flaws at this point in time that I see that Canelo Alvarez has. Stamina, I do think, used to be an issue with Canelo Alvarez in the past, but I think all in all that he really has paced himself much better to the point to where I don't think that it's really a huge problem, at least unless you're going to go to the body with him consistently. But I've just never seen anyone try to go to the body to Canelo Alvarez very consistently. Who knows? Maybe it'll take another fighter to do that. Will Caleb Plant be able to do this? Will Caleb Plant be able to defeat the monster that is known as Canelo Alvarez right now? Will he be able to defeat him? I don't know. What I'm going to say is this. I think that Caleb Plant, I think that he's a very special fighter. I think that he's a very special fighter. I think all in all that he's very talented once again. I think that he's very slick. I think all in all that he's very speedy. I think that he's very fast. I think that he has very good footwork. But one fatal flaw that I would say that I see in Caleb Plant is at times he can not have the best defense, and also at times he needs to keep his hands up a little bit more. And fighters that don't like to keep their hands up, depending on who you are, they tend to get hit. Even the best of them, like Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, a lot of the times, would drop his hands in certain fights. But when he would fight more elite opponents like a Joe Frazier or something like that, sometimes he would tend to get hit up a little bit more. So you have to keep your hands up in this fight. Caleb Plant has to be the most defensively responsible that he ever has been. He has to be the quickest that he ever has been. He has to be the smartest that he ever has been. And can he do all those things? We'll see. What do I personally think that Caleb Plant needs to do in order to beat Canelo Alvarez in this fight? I think all in all, I would give the same advice to someone like Caleb Plant, just like I gave to Billy Joe Saunders, or just like I would give to Demetrius Andrade. I think you need to try to jab to Canelo Alvarez. I think all in all that you need to work that to the body and to the head. Canelo used to have a big problem with certain guys that had an excellent jab, like a Gennady Golovkin or a Lara or a Mayweather, people like that can establish their jab very, very well. But Canelo has really started to defend against that very, very well. I think that he really has started to learn to be greater, in that category. So it's going to be very hard. You can't just repeatedly jab him to the head. You're going to have to mix it up to the body. You're going to have to throw feints. You're going to have to mix it up to the body and the head. You're going to have to throw certain rights to the body, so throw certain hooks to the body. Make sure overall that you occupied a vacated space. And what I mean by that overall is that if he's getting into your grill, if he's getting into your area, you need to get into an open space immediately, because Canelo Alvarez is a very hard puncher. And at any point in time, he can hurt you at this point in time. Andre Ward said something very interesting overall training Caleb Plant. He said all in all that apparently he does not believe in overall, just trying to sit back and box perfectly for 12 rounds against guys that are known to hurt you. And I tend to agree with Andre Ward, because Tyson Fury, he kind of took that approach against Deontay Wilder. And Andre Ward, in a way, he also kind of took that approach to Sergey Kovalev. And Canelo also took that approach against Gennady Golovkin in the rematch. Certain guys like that are great power punchers and that can hurt you. And especially with Canelo, I think Caleb Plant, he is going to have to be mainly on the defensive. He is going to mainly have to be slick. But you got to establish a jab out there. Try to go to the body a hell of a lot. Even throw double jabs, triple jabs at times. If you get on the inside, if you're able to tie Canelo up, if you're able to get some sort of separation, dig uppercuts in there, dig hooks in there. Dig a left hook to the head, every once in a while. Try to frustrate him, roughhouse him up a little bit, when it comes down to it. Frustrate him. And I think all in all, that's what you have to do to Canelo Alvarez. You have to try and make him very uncomfortable. You have to try to really outsmart him. And these 168 and these 160 pounders, man, I don't see any fighters out there that could potentially do that, at least to the degree to where I personally believe that Canelo Alvarez would suffer a bad loss or even a loss to them. I mean, when it comes down to it, like I said, I think all these fighters are very, very talented. I think that Demetrius Andrade, Jamal Charlo, David Benavidez, Caleb Plant, all the remaining undefeated fighters within those range, I think that they're all very, very talented. I don't see them beating Canelo. There's no fights within those weight classes that I see as 50-50 fights. There just isn't. There's only one fight in the world that, as of right now, within the 160 to 175 pound range, that if they were to face Canelo, I would maybe call it a 50-50 fight, and that would be against Artur Beterbiev. And that's only if he's not possibly weight drained. So we'll see all in all what happens there. But when it comes down to the overall, like I said, it'll be very, very interesting to see this fight. I think Caleb Plant, he's going to have to be as smart as he ever has been when it comes down to it. He's going to have to put on a hell of a performance. He's going to have to be very fast. He has to be very defensively responsible as well. Like I said, Caleb Plant, there were certain people overall that were saying that, all in all, that sometimes Caleb Plant at the end of the fights, he overall, starts wearing down and all this other stuff. I don't think it's necessarily that he starts wearing down. It's just that he doesn't always necessarily keep his hands up. So when he fights some more elite opponents like a Jose Uzcategui, when he fought that one fighter, can't remember where he was from, Venezuela or somewhere down there, I believe, south of the borders in South America, I believe. But when it comes down to the overall, that's why he was getting caught, especially in the final 4 rounds in that fight. He has to keep his hands up. And I'm hoping training with Andre Ward, I hope that helped him overall to the maximum or the most amount that it could. And I'm hoping that Caleb Plant overall puts on a very impressive performance. Going to the body to Canelo Alvarez, that's not something that a lot of people also like to do, but I think that it's something all in all that you have to do. I think all in all that it's something that you really, really, really have to try to do. You have to jab to his body repeatedly. You're going to have to throw little uppercuts here and there if he gets close to you. Throw that left hook to the body. Maybe throw a double jab, then a right hand up to the head, then a left hook, dig it to the body. Throw different types of combinations. Try to, fool him out when it comes down to it. Try to trick him. Always try to, come up with new combinations. Always, never be too repetitive, because Canelo, he's a very intelligent fighter. And when it comes down to the overall, Canelo, he can time you extremely well. He's an excellent counter puncher. And Canelo, he's got excellent, excellent power. My prediction personally for this fight, I think that Canelo Alvarez, all in all, is going to win this fight. What I will say is this: if Caleb Plant somehow were able to pull off the upset, would I be, as shell-shocked as, say, when Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas or something? No. But when it comes down to it, I would be pretty shocked. Let's just say that, because Canelo, he's at a point in time in his career to where I just don't see any clear people out there that I really would bet to beat him. There's just no fighters out there. And Canelo, unlike Lomachenko, when he was at 135, and, if he were to go around those weight classes, Lomachenko, he's a very talented guy, but he's not a guy necessarily that, can handle the power as well as Canelo Alvarez. And he's not a guy, all in all, that is gifted as physically overall as a Canelo Alvarez. And what I mean by that is that Canelo, he at least has about a good 70-inch reach. A lot of those guys are in the 160 and 168-pound weight class, even the 175-pound weight class, they don't always outreach you by a great amount. Like the longest reach you're going to see maybe is 75 inches usually. But a lot of these fighters, they have about the same reach that Canelo Alvarez has, anywhere from 70, maybe 72, 73 inches. Sometimes Lomachenko, he's facing guys, sometimes in these weight divisions now, he's going to be facing guys that have about anywhere from a 5 to 7 inch reach advantage over him. So when it comes down to the overall, that's a little bit of a different situation. But Canelo, all in all, he's a little bit more physically gifted in terms of the reach for his size. And on top of that, his power is very, very devastating when it comes down to it. And Canelo has a great chin. Canelo, all in all, has a fantastic chin. That's not me saying that Vasily Lomachenko doesn't have a decent chin as well. But Canelo's chin, that might be the best chin in all of boxing right now. I don't think I've ever seen Canelo Alvarez knocked down in a fight. I've seen him hurt a couple of times, very rarely. But Canelo is just, he's a very great fighter. And I think at this point in time, he's just on another level almost compared to everybody else. We'll see what Caleb Plant can do. I think all in all that he's going to have to establish a lot in this fight. I think all in all that he's got to stand his ground here and there, but you got to be majorly defensively responsible. And can he do that? I don't know. We'll see. But it'll be very interesting. My prediction for this fight is I'm going to go with Canelo Alvarez, probably by unanimous decision. But if a knockout occurred within about 9 rounds, I would not be surprised either. So we'll see what happens. I'm personally going to go with Canelo Alvarez in this fight. It'll be very, very interesting. But I got to go with Canelo Alvarez. And we'll see who becomes the complete unified 168-pounder in the world. It'll be very, very interesting. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.